Beware.
Excuse me. Here we go. Okay. Get rid of that. Okay. Welcome back to Viewer Beware. It's the only show where we go over each and every episode of the original 90s Goosebumps TV series. And tonight we are watching Revenge of the Gnomes. Now, gnomes usually aren't that scary. I guess it depends on who you ask. Sometimes they could be creepy. But I guess we've never seen one properly motivated, which is the case in Revenge of the Gnomes. But I guess even that part's a little unclear because in order to take revenge, you need to have been wronged in some way. And as far as we can tell from the show, gnomes are just kind of like that, without being wronged. So, you know, it is what it is. Well, anyway, let's just get into it. Revenge of the Gnomes is a story of a little kid being framed by mischievous pranksters. Sure, we've seen it before, but have we seen it with shape-shifting little people in plastic disco vests? I think not. So, let's turn out those lights and get into the film. Turn out the lights, who says that? We start in an idyllic suburban town. Siblings Mindy and Joe Burton play catch in their front lawn. Also, I have to point out Joe's hat. I've never seen a hat worn with so little caution. That thing is just barely on there. Anyway, Mindy throws a ball across the hedge and into the neighbor's yard, forcing Joe to get it back. However, he gets caught red-handed by the angry Major McCall, who admonishes dumb hat Joe for disturbing his garden.
And you stay out of my garden.
Soon afterwards, the kid's dad comes home with a fresh haul of brand new lawn ornaments. Gnomes, to be exact. Joe comments how weird looking the gnomes are before one falls on him and he starts freaking out for no reason.
Scary.
As the family prepares their garden gnomescape yard, Major McCall notices what they have going on and decides to lob some insults.
Hey, Burton! You didn't tell me your relatives were coming to visit.
Here we learn that there's a summer garden contest and the neighbors fiercely compete in it. McCall believes the only way to have an award-winning garden is through strict regime and order, while the Burton family feels more whimsical in their garden pursuits. We also get some hints that Joe and McCall have been at odds for quite some time, and it's alluded that Joe has tampered with McCall's garden in the past. That night, McCall's fresh produce gets destroyed, leading him to confront Joe that morning. Joe claims raccoons probably tampered with the garden, but McCall is quick to give evidence to the contrary.
Now, raccoons are smart, but they don't throw things against walls, and I never saw one who could do this.
Whoa.
Joe's dad, confused about the whole ordeal, just warns Joe to leave the neighbor alone. Joe and Mindy sit out in the garden to stew over the accusation, and McCall gives them a threat to not mess with his garden again. Joe does a really good job at selling the death glare too. It's chilling. After McCall goes back to his own business, Joe cleans up the garden and notices the gnomes are covered in black ink and melon seeds. Pretty suspicious. That night we see for the first time the gnomes awaken. Joe must have also sensed them because he wakes up out of nowhere and goes out to the garden, where he notices the gnomes missing from their stands. Joe hears a ruckus coming from McCall's yard and goes to investigate, where he finds the two gnomes walking around tearing up everything. As the gnomes find out they've been discovered, floodlights and sirens fill the yard and the gnomes turn back into ceramic, perfectly framing Joe as McCall comes out to survey the damage. Also, the gnomes are clearly just guys in pleather costumes, trying their best to stand still, and it's pretty funny. Anyway, Joe's dad comes out to discover the scene and tells Joe he is going to repair the garden as punishment. The next day, Joe is hard at work under the militant lead of McCall. As Joe works, Mindy stays out to mock him for making up the gnome story, giving Joe the idea to catch the gnomes in the act. That night, Joe wakes up late to catch the gnomes on video, but realizes he has no tapes left to record them, so he rushes to wake up Mindy to get a witness. As the two explore the garden, they encounter a whole cult of gnomes skulking around the property, and eventually get cornered by them.
Squish 'em like bugs. That's stupid. Let you twist them like pretzel. No.
It's unclear what they're going to do, or why they're going to do it, so Mindy just straight up asks,
Why are you doing this?
Don't you know anything about gnomes? It's what we do. It's in our nature.
After a scuffle, the gnomes drop a flashlight, showing that they are weak to any light source, rendering them frozen in ceramic again. Joe uses this to his advantage to walk all the way back to his house before the flashlight eventually dies. Now here the kids could easily just run inside and turn on all of the lights, but instead they run into McCall's yard and end up triggering the floodlights. McCall immediately is on the scene and tells the kids to scram, which they happily oblige, leaving McCall to clean up the gnomes. The next day at the summer garden judging, we see that Mr. Burton is on the verge of winning the grand prize, but just narrowly misses out because of a hideous addition to the yard.
Hideous lawn ornament. That.
So McCall's a lawn gnome now. Why not? Everything's so goddamn weird. Who cares anymore? When the lights are off, does he turn into a normal-sized guy again? Or is he just like a little person that is dressed in camo? Who knows? In the book, actually, Joe's dad replaces his lawn gnomes with a giant gorilla, which also comes alive, so we can assume that any kind of lawn accoutrement is blessed with sentience when it's in this lawn. I guess not even just in this lawn, just any lawn. So there's probably just lawns full of pink flamingos and lawn jockeys roaming free. Questions. But what's not a question is that Revenge of the Gnomes is not scary. The monsters cause as much mischief as a group of bored teenagers, and honestly they're really easy to stop now that everybody has a flashlight on their cell phone. But high point of this episode is Joe, who does a lot of heavy lifting with his weird hat and intense death glare. McCall he's there, but I never really got the impression of like military hard ass, like R. Lee Ermey, the guy from Full Metal Jacket, who is just like the staple of like military guy in movies and TV shows from like the 80s to the 2000s. But this guy just gives off more of a vibe of like a retired musical theater teacher that likes camo and the Pentagon. Overall, pretty weak episode. For that, I'm gonna have to say it's like one bump. I'll give it one. I'll give it a bump. I'll give it a half. I'll give it one bump. We'll stand firm. One bump out of 5. You can miss it. You won't miss anything. I summed up the whole thing here. You already got it. You saw it. You got it. You ingested it. You know what it's about. Yeah, I'm confident in my answer here. Anyway, come back to Viewer Beware next time when we go over something scarier than lawn gnomes. I know that's tough to imagine, but it's out there, just like the truth in the X-Files and Santa Claus.